In 2010, Frictional Games had released something that redefined what horror meant in video games. No weapons, no hope, just you and the dark. And boy, is it ever dark. You weren't a hero, you weren't even safe. And that really was the point. Amnesia: The Dark Descent wasn't just a horror title. It was where decades of game design, in my opinion, finally converged, where horror learned, evolved, and was completely reborn. My name is Chaos, and today I want to talk to you about some games from history that I think made Amnesia possible. We play horror games, not because we like pain, but because fear makes us feel, and not many games captured that quite like Amnesia, the way that Amnesia did. In the early 1980s, horror in games didn't rely on graphics or gore. It was pure imagination. In Haunted House, one of the first credited survival horror games for Atari, you were just a pair of floating eyes wandering through darkness, looking for 3 parts of a magical urn, all while being chased by ghosts, bats, and spiders. Then came Sweet Home, a Japanese survival horror RPG that introduced limited items, locked doors, and real stakes. It's credited often as being the precursor inspiration for things like quick time events, inventory management, using its Metroidvania-style exploration. And additionally, this game is often in the conversation about what inspired the Resident Evil series, and many other games that have come out since. And it was developed alongside a horror movie of the same name. And something wild that I found out about this game is that it has 5 different endings in 1989, which is wild. Alone in the Dark came out in 1992, which finally brought horror into the 3D space, with cinematic angles, stylized art, and haunting stillness. It was one of the first 2 games to use polygonal characters over pre-rendered backgrounds, and it's cited as the first ever 3D survival horror game. Alone in the Dark's central storyline was also directly inspired by the likes of H.P. Lovecraft, the horror and film director Dario Argento, and the zombie movie legend George A. Romero, which all of that we may dive into in another video. These early games couldn't rely on realism. Their fear came from suggestion, from what your mind filled in. But what scares us changes over time. In the 80s, we feared monsters and mutation, visible physical danger. In the 90s, the terror turned inward. We were the monsters of our own design. In 1996, Resident Evil gave fear a system. Its fixed camera and slow movement made tension palpable, and the moment-to-moment gameplay was paced well, and one wrong move could spell death for you. Limited ammo, tight spaces, Jill controlling like a tank, slow reloads. Fear became math. Managing your inventory and your health added to the tension of being trapped in a mansion most of the time.
Here's the serum! Richard, hold on! I'll give you a shot now.
Silent Hill came out in 1999, 3 years after Resident Evil, but it changed things up. The Resident Evil sequels leaned more into the action and combat, whereas Silent Hill made fear personal. It slowed down the scares and leaned into the surreal. If monsters were born from trauma, its story from guilt and grief. But games gave you control, guns, safe rooms, save files. You were afraid, sure, but not powerless. You could handle what was chasing you by standing to face it defiantly. And power, as we'd soon learn, it kills fear. By the 2000s, horror started evolving again. In the wake of the world changing and the way we perceived horror in our games, the things that go bump in the night are met with the rack of a shotgun slide and sick guitar riffs. But some games changed the way we could be scared. Games like Doom 3, which were already a well-established first-person shooter franchise at this point, started using dramatic lighting and dedicated flashlight to tear us away from the grips of our guns. Fear came out a year after Doom 3, and had been directly inspired by Japanese horror games. But it used lighting in really dramatic, different ways that had not really been seen before, as well as a particle effects system that would flip your console into jet engine mode, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. Not to mention, the game was scary. Fear blended the elements of FPS action and horror that has not really been seen in that way since, at least in the same ways. Several years following Fear, in 2008, Dead Space came out, and it changed the formula again, moving back to a third-person perspective with a sleek, realistic UI built onto the character, and being able to use the world and physics to dispatch your enemies. That was different. Horror was powerful again, as long as you kept your distance and space. I want to pause here and briefly talk about Half-Life 2 before we get into the next section. Despite it not strictly being a horror game, Half-Life 2 deserves to be talked about. It introduced physics and physics puzzles. It gave you a world with weight. It wasn't horror, mostly, but inspired the next leap and changed the way game worlds were conceived and perceived. And with that out of the way, we can continue. After the success of Dead Space, it felt like we could take on any evil. Outwardly, inwardly, we were triumphant. Horror had been defeated, seemingly, but at least the formula of it. To be scary again, horror had to take everything back. The gun, the control, and all of the comfort in between. Before Amnesia, there was Penumbra, a strange atmospheric series also from Frictional, which gave you weapons, but they were almost useless. Combat was a choice, and seemingly never the right one. Fighting could make the game harder, but wouldn't you know it, instead of pressing a button to open a door, you moved it yourself. That small interaction made all of the difference. You weren't just watching horror, you were in it. If you missed opening that door while you were being chased, you were going to get got by the monster. And this was a game changer. Penumbra gave us the blueprint, very little combat, limited light, full immersion. Resident Evil gave us the slow tension building hallways and key puzzles. Silent Hill gave us a reason to question our own motives. Alone in the Dark gave us an inventory system. Doom and Fear gave us a reason to be scared of the shadows. Dead Space and Half-Life 2 made us feel weighted in a world that was previously largely weightless. All of these, culminating into what would come next. All of this was the spark that ignited Amnesia. When Amnesia launched in 2010, it didn't just join horror, it redefined it. Every design choice echoed horror's history, horror and video games history, and it felt like it funneled into this moment. The isolation, the psychology, the helplessness, and the immersion of all the games that came before it. No combat, a sanity system that punishes curiosity, sound and darkness as weapons. Your light sources had to be managed, because your life depends on it. You weren't fighting a monster. You were surviving yourself, managing your fear, making your way through the winding corridors of Brennenburg Castle, looking desperately for any hints to what you are doing and who you are.
My name is... I am Daniel.
And when players started to upload videos of them playing it, horror became shareable. Millions screamed, laughed, and panicked together.
Get back! You don't want to mess with me. I got a chair. Ah! Oh God! Ah! Ah!
The impact it had on gaming and gaming culture was felt for years to come afterwards, and is still felt to this day. Some people even built their empires off of this game. It popularized the Let's Play video style, and couch co-op style video watching was now digitized. You could be scared together while being apart. Amnesia taught us that fear isn't about what you see, it's about what you can't do. When you can't fight, every sound is a threat. When you can't see, your imagination turns on you. When you can't control, you finally feel true terror. Horror is most powerful when it removes safety, when only the player remains, alone and afraid, in the dark. In those moments, Amnesia wasn't just scary. It was an honest look and reflection of us as people. It made us vulnerable. Amnesia: The Dark Descent didn't just scare us, it reminded us of what fear could be. It stripped horror down to its bones, showing that the scariest thing in the dark isn't the monster, it's the mind. Next time, we'll explore how Amnesia reshaped modern horror, and why its own influence still echoes today on much of what we have come to love and appreciate. But I want to leave you with this. What's your favorite horror game? Did Amnesia inspire it? Let me know in the comments down below. My name is Chaos, that is Danny Dorito, and you are awesome. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.